Welcome back to the Trending Communicator. I'm your host, Dan Nessel. Here on the show, we spend a lot of time, well, maybe all of our time, talking about the future of communications. Not telecommunications and not how to improve your elocution type of communications, but capital C communications, a collection of disciplines that includes, depending on who you talk to, corporate communications, marketing communications, brand communications, crisis communications, executive communications, public affairs, public relations, PR, investor relations, IR, government relations, GR, internal or employee communications, and actually, believe it or not, the list keeps going on. Now, not every company needs all of these, and even fewer need them all at once, but they all need to tell their stories in the right places at the right times to the right audiences to build trust, authority, and influence. It's a lot. And it should be obvious that success at all of these things requires alignment and integration with business strategy. And I'm sure you've heard time and time again that comms needs to partner with business and keep business front and center in our work. I probably say stuff like this sometimes. But shouldn't it just be a given? Shouldn't comms just be as integral to strategy as marketing, sales, finance, and even HR? Well, my guest today will tell you that yes, it is a given. And in fact, comms is itself a leadership strategy. Kristel Valaydon is the founder of KV Communications, and over 25 years, she's developed what she calls the 5 spheres of connection framework. She's been testing this approach with ambitious founders and forward-thinking teams, the kind of leaders trying to shift minds, models, and markets while building genuine communities around their mission. Her basic premise? That most of what we call communications is really just broadcasting. She positions PR as a business strategy and not a marketing function. And she's not theorizing from the sidelines. She's contributing to inclusive design conversations, judging business awards, and working hands-on with businesses to try to balance growth with meaningful impact. So today I want to dig into this idea that communications is a leadership strategy, not just a support function, because if she's right, then maybe we've been thinking about our roles all wrong. So let's get into it with Kristel. Kristel, here you are. Welcome.
Thank you so much for that great intro. That was very kind, and just excited to be able to talk about this with someone that I've absolutely loved hearing your views on PR, and we've had many conversations over. So yes, it'll be fun to dig in.
It's going to be great to dig in. And I should clarify, I gave the laundry list of all the different parts of comms, on the upfront, and sometimes I complain when people say, "Oh, you mean PR?" Because PR to me is really that media relations, external relations part of this that is, trying to earn media and earn, attention out there. It's just it's just a small part of this. But I realize that there is a vocabulary question there, and I'm not going to hold my, put a line in the sand around saying comms or PR, especially because, from the UK, often the term PR is just used to just blanket describe the comms discipline. And I know that's where you come from. So I won't get on my, no, it's not just PR, it's comms high horse, because frankly, it doesn't really matter to anybody anyway. But I will say that, the work that you're doing in describing, or the way that you just kind of described to me back when we first started talking about PR is a leadership strategy, was just something I had never heard before. I hear aspirational things about PR needs to be part of the strategy, but your approach is interesting, and we want to hear about it. Now, before we actually get into it, I just want to give everybody that kind of usual, how do you know this amazing person, little background. And once again, it comes down to Mark Schaefer and the Uprising. I've talked about that before. We met October of 24, I think it was, at the Uprising, the best conference that anybody could ever, conference is a terrible way to call it, the best meeting of minds, retreat, think tank in the woods that anybody could ever hope to go for. So plug for Mark and the Uprising, please go. But I'll tell you, it has changed my life in so many ways. And now we're looking at one of the ways in which it's changed my life by associating me with Kristel, whom, by the way, I've been calling Kristel for too long. And now I know it's Kristel. So I've been talking too long. Kristel, how's it going? What's happening? And, let's talk about you and where, you have such a fascinating career. I love the way that you talk about your focus on the rebels or trying to create rebels in the PR industry. And that's exactly what I love. What I love about what we do, all try to do. And, you've been working with very unique kinds of clients since you left the agency world and corporate world. Let's just get a brief overview of your background, who you are, and, what brings you to us today.
Absolutely. I would also say shout out to Mark Schaefer's Uprising. Loved our conversations and just where we feel the future of business is going, and why this conversation, especially from a PR industry perspective, I feel is just so important with what's going on in the world. And how this all started, I suppose, is very much a case of I left agency quite defeated and deflated, thinking there's got to be a better way.
How did that happen?
How exactly?
Never heard that before.
And it's part rage, really, and part dare of I'm looking at how we are using PR as a function, as it were, at the time. My background is I actually went to university to study PR. So in a way, when we're talking about the origin and what it means, I'm going back to my uni days now, which I never thought I would do. But I came out into the real world of business and an agency, and I just noticed for pretty much the duration, it was media relations. It was very much focused on celebrity. I'm showing my age now, but as you're going into the early 40s, it's like it had to have a celebrity on it for it to mean anything. And consequently, I'm thinking, where's the impact? What are we doing? How are we working like this? But then, interestingly, I started working with smaller boutiques, agencies, which I absolutely loved because you start becoming more involved in the business side of things. I didn't have that with the larger agencies and agency that I worked at, which I didn't really get on with at all. I was far more curious. I was just too inquisitive. I wanted to know what worked. If I'm going to spend a lot of time, blood, sweat and tears as teams do, trying to get the client what they need and make them look good, I want to know what the impact is. So we're having those business conversations and discovering actually no one's measuring. So how are we measuring it? And as it turns out, what benefits are we giving the clients here? And there's still confusion, and we're still having the same conversations that we had throughout my entire career, even now. We don't understand what PR is. We don't understand what the value is. I get lots of media coverage. I still don't know what it is. And that seems to be all they focus on in terms of agency. And we're seeing, even with the development of AI and this rapid era that we're in now, all agencies are really talking about is how media relations can be AI friendly, and we're looking at AI search. And you and I have had this conversation so often. It's like it's a fifth of media relations is a fifth of what we do, a fifth. And the 5 spheres came out after I knew when I started KB Comms, I really wanted to learn more. I really wanted to come up with a solution for better business and also making sure that we're delivering that impact. And it was a tried and tested approach, to be honest. I had no aspirations to be a business owner, but it was listening to those clients and thinking, what is it that we need to achieve here? And really sensing their frustrations in what they have to deal with, how they have to break through markets. And like I said, we call them rebels and misfits, but it's a term of endearment. They don't call themselves that at all, but they're so creative and innovative, and they are trying something completely different. And that's what I love about them. That's what I did with my business. I looked at, hang on a second, we don't have to focus on the traditional retainers. We don't have to look at the metrics. Like, I will absolutely refuse AVEs as a measurement.
That's a whole conversation, AVE.
That I'm sure that will come up as we run.
We'll get back to it.
But looking at them, I realized it was more consultative. It was a blend of consultant strategy and then also implementation that I was offering, because I really wanted that. I call it sleeves up, hands on approach. If I'm going to come up with strategy, I want to empower that client to understand what we're doing. There's full transparency there, and then equally, I want to make sure it works. And then I always said it'll take me 10 years to figure this out, leave me alone. And then it was soon enough, it was like, right, I've actually come up with this framework, like 14 years, we're coming into 15 years of now launching it. But it will be a case of, I think this will bring clarity and it will really help businesses in this new era that we're in. And that's where it sort of like came from.
They absolutely need that clarity too. I mean, you said that when you talk about your clients and, you know, the rebels and the misfits, one of the things about being in PR and comms is people talk about their customers and their clients willy-nilly. And I think it's hard for the lay people out there to really understand what we mean by that, because sometimes your clients are like the chief communications officer or the director of communications. Like sometimes it really does boil down to a person within an organization. Sometimes it's the CEO, depending on the size of the company and how savvy that person is, and, you know, and so on. Sometimes HR, who knows? You know, I feel bad for those whose clients are HR. I'm just kidding. We love HR. We love internal comms. That said, like, who are your clients? Are they comms people? Are they business people? Are they both? Where's your sweet spot?
Yeah, it's really interesting when we're talking about your proposition as a business, you know, really have that persona, that target market. Who is it that you're reaching to? I just realized it is actually the values of who they are. And for me, when I say rebel and misfits, and again, I say that as a term of endearment, we are talking about the founders, the owners, the entrepreneurs, and the intrapreneurs. So it's a certain level in the business that I work with best, because I'm the fixer. I'm going to come in and help you fix those challenges that you're facing. We're not working with CEOs and CMOs of large brands, but maybe the teams within that organization, or maybe an organization with several brands underneath. And I love a good underdog story. So it's the dark horse that's probably overlooked, that trying to build its momentum and really break out here. And so for me, whether you're a startup or whether or not you're within that organization, it really is that pain point that you're at. Where are you sitting? And what do you need to achieve? And for them, it really is, it's either breakout, it's getting to the next level. It could be as well for the startup, it could be they just need to get investment, really need to launch, or scale or grow.
It's interesting because I think a lot of bigger agencies and even some seasoned PR pros out there, you know, tend to be in this kind of maintenance mode with their customers and clients, and that's who they serve best. And I'm not saying this is, I'm not making a value judgment. I think that there is that whole swath of the client base and the customer base that is really just like, we just want to maintain our reputation, or we just want media coverage, and that's all we ever want from you. And that creates one set of deliverables, and you know, and you can do that, and I'm sure you can make a good living at it. But I'm of the mind that I would much rather be doing what you do, working with the rebels, working with the innovators, the people who understand that we used to put things in silos and buckets, but now there's either the silos have burned down and the buckets have a lot of holes in them, or, you know, it's just a faulty way to think of things anyway, partly because that's just the nature of business now, but it's also because of the advent of AI. And if you're not thinking about how, you know, those traditional boxes that we would put ourselves in the past, it was just very recent, you know, and actually the past is present now for many companies, probably for the majority of people. But if you're focused on those boxes, you know, AI is such a disruptor. It's changing, you know, there's a lot of discussion about this and people are struggling with how do we implement. I think it, you know, it definitely goes far beyond that. AI, my friend Chris Perry recently he said something on that really resonated with me. He said, it's like having a PhD in your pocket. And when every employee has a PhD in your pocket, how does that really how does that support an organization that is set in like very fixed paths and ways? Like you're missing so much, and the rebels get it.
I think this has happened before. This has started way before AI, and you've had a brilliant guest on your podcast, Ginny Dietrich, who for me, I absolutely am so thankful for the PESO model to be able to explain this to clients in terms of we've evolved in terms of media, how it all works and what those outputs are now. And really having to say to clients, especially when I started KB Comms, to be able to say more bluntly and freely, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
I'm not going to sit here and be a media hits horse for you. At the end of what you want and where you want to see the traction and the results could be somewhere different. So let's explore that. And I think we've seen the breakdown of media. We've seen we've seen media breakdown in terms of trust and in particular consumer trust, but then also we've seen the decline of media. You know, we used to have it's so much more fractional and siloed now to where those outputs are. And then add in the fact that, yes, we've got technology and this is, you know, pandemic of loneliness. So even though we're so much more connected, we're so inherently lonely. It's just, this is how consumers are right now.
It is really
it's worse.
It's getting worse. And, you know, your focus on community is probably one of the solves for that. And, you know, and again, we'll get to that. I just want, something you said was hit something with me, which was that the media is losing power or losing relevance or whatever. I'm paraphrasing. It's not exactly what you said, but it's interesting because this disruption and the audience change has disintermediated the media from which is wild because it's the same root word, but they disintermediated the media from discourse in so many ways. And yet, there are some more traditional media vehicles, media platforms and properties that are seeing, if they see it, if they know what they're doing, a renewed opportunity to increase their relevance and topple, or at least kind of have people honestly rethink what tier one, top tier, you know, those media hit highs really mean. And I'm referring to trades and you know, popular newsletters and things like this that have very fixed and niche audiences, and have been innovating. You know, trades, for example, are doing a lot more multimedia and podcasts and just scrappy and, you know, low budget, trying to do what they can do. And I think the wheel is turning a little bit more where, you know, we need to be helping our clients to understand that, you know, just because it's the Pipefitters Journal or whatever it is, you know, that may be far more valuable to you than a front page on the Wall Street Journal. Yeah.
Well, we used to look at media, didn't we, in terms of a source of news, and they would be looking at, it would be reporting. It would be reporting what's outside and sending it through to us through their channels. And now when I look at different media companies, when you look at something like Time Magazine, they're full on brand. What is this brand about? It's about trust and how they're going about to develop that brand so that they're more appealing to advertisers, or, you know, the very fact that they're bucking the trends. They haven't done the paywall option. They're making it more open. So then you've got more viral campaigns that can come through with shared content. So they're really trying to think about innovative ways to make themselves more relevant. When I look at, it was really interesting actually looking more at insights and research and how media companies are really embracing this. Politico will, and the FT, for example, if you think about subscription costs to media now, and you're spending £500 for the Financial Times for membership, but they're looking at how they can be more applicable and more relevant to their readers, and are really trying to nurture that. You look at the Daily Telegraph, somebody shared it was on LinkedIn, it was brilliant. It was this massive screen in front of the newsroom, and they were tracking sort of what the readership trends would be, so that then they can put it back into the reporting, because they know that those clicks are going to be relevant for their readers. So what's going to be relevant? So they're looking to their readers to look at what the content should be. And that's something that blows my mind. And again, when you've got something like Politico, when I was listening to their case study, I thought it was fascinating in the sense of, well, how we're not only making sure that we're collecting these thought leaders, but then also what do we do next in terms of making positive change outside in that world? Not just listening to voices, but then how do we activate that? And so it's got a different head on it, and it's going to change. But like you said, it's the difference of how it's working. We're watching journalists now move to Substack.
Yeah,
maybe that's where they can write more freely, but and write what they want. And it'll be really interesting to see how, like you said, the podcasts and what people are going to consume now and where they're going to get their news. It's so much more fragmented.
I know this is taking us a little off track, and I'm going to get to the spheres very shortly, I promise. But it's really interesting, Substack situation. I think it's connected to exactly what you're saying about the larger media organizations becoming metric savvy and really focusing in on okay, what do their readers want? Because sometimes the readers want the wrong things. When you're talking about news, if you're talking about developing a product, you're talking about making a better mousetrap, whatever, and you want to understand what the customers want. You want to hear in real time, no, this is messy, or this is I don't use this really well. I don't think you necessarily want to hear that with news. Maybe in general, like with non-news content, you want to kind of work that in. But with reporting, it's supposed to be reporting. And if you pay too close attention to what the readers want on a minute by minute basis, you're essentially becoming a populist organization, and you're going to shift. You're going to shift and with the waves of opinion. And what do you stand for? So Substack has become this, this zone where, yes, those reporters, especially investigative reporters or feature writers who, have longer stories to tell, bigger and more provocative points of view, in terms of news, and then in terms of just people who are creators or talking about business, et cetera. It is a free zone for them to talk about whatever they want to talk about, or write about. That it's no surprise that many of the more serious journalists and writers have moved there, because they get to listen to what they think or follow what they think is the right path for news. They don't have to worry about, the populist kind of view. Now they're eventually, are they going to become slaves to their mailing lists and to their readers? Who knows? I mean, it kind of, I think it comes and goes in cycles. But I'm really curious about it. I'm on Substack. I like it. And, I get a lot of great feedback from it. But we didn't come here to talk about that necessarily. You have a very, you mentioned working with rebels and misfits. I like that. And I'm sure that's shaped the way that you think about how you deliver the best, most business relevant strategic communications services to them. But more than I think anything else, it's informed your model, your framework, the 5 spheres. Is the 5 spheres of connection? Is that right? Yeah, the 5 spheres of connection. And I was fascinated by this. You had said to me earlier, you weren't sure if it's necessarily, original, 100% original thinking, or if it's also being used by similar things are being used by other agencies or other professionals, and that's fine, right? I mean, that means you're onto something. But what is your take on this? what are the 5 spheres? Let's go through them one by one. Let's talk about it and go from there. So the 5 spheres of connection moves businesses beyond traditional tactics. How does it do that?
So, well, it goes back to the fact, I mean, just to thread the previous conversation in, the traditional way of PR is just not working. It won't work. And sometimes when you are somebody that's trying to perhaps challenge the status quo in what you're trying to do, you're going to have to find a different path. And for me, there's so much pressure on founders and leaders and even within larger organizations, those team leaders. You can't really drive change by yourself. You need a team, you need a tribe, you need a community around you to help break through those doors. And also who share your vision. It's better in numbers. So really the comms aspect for me is where I look at PR as I almost call it PR as a business strategy, because you'll have that business framework. Of course you will, how it works, the operations, the insights, the sales. You look at then the original definition of PR of it's about reputation. It's about what you say, what you do, and what others say about you. And it's about connecting with your stakeholder audiences. And it's those stakeholder audiences which will ultimately be that community around your business. And we talk about community in different ways, especially with the growth of community and brands. And I'll make that differentiation. But the way that I see community in this space, when I say we're creating community, is that we are breaking down the silos, because ultimately the way that the world has changed, comms has changed, we do need more unity. And we've been so fractioned and siloed and sort of divided in our roles because, as you said earlier, internal comms is a whole profession in itself. Media relations is a whole business model in itself. Local community, trade relations, you could all do these things quite separately on your own. But when I go in and I'm speaking to clients, it makes me realize how they're not taking advantage and they're not maximizing or optimizing the resources that they have right there in front of them. And there might not be a big organization, but whether you're the big organization or a small startup, you will have these 5 spheres that you could activate to help you get your message across. And it would just help that mission that you're trying to achieve with your business flow even smoother, because otherwise you are trying to separate your messaging across 5 groups. Just take that one group, that campaign that you're doing, and just tailor it. Make it easier for yourself. So the 5 spheres for me, and trying to sort of, how does it start? It really was, when I say it, there's nothing original, it's not so much that, the framing of it will be applicable to the clients that I'm speaking to. But we know this as comms professionals, and it's just that aha moment of how we thread it together. And I suppose it'll always be in the style and the brand of who's doing it. That's what makes it different. But I look at the 5 spheres and I'll say to the client, and the great thing is, having done some business pitches where they've just gone, no one's explained it to us like this before. Already we're sort of like streamlining the confusion and the clarity. But it starts with the visionary. It starts with that leader. What was their mission? What are they trying to achieve? And we talk about all different ways of trying to communicate that story and who they need to communicate that. And we could break that down further. But, we talk about, don't we, the brand heroes, the hero story, the journey. What is it that they saw a gap in the market? Why is it so important to them? Why is it so important to everybody else? And it really is, how do we need them at the top, because ultimately that's who everyone's buying into. And statistically, you can see that, I think it was fascinating to me. I think it was Haver's Group that said how 77% of consumers will want to see the founder at the top of the company because they want to buy into their values. And they want to see that leader as quite visible to what they're communicating. They buy into that. And you look at companies like Patagonia and you see the values that are in there. Sure. Why is that so effective?
I mean, does the same thing apply to like Fortune 500 companies, like massive, huge companies where they, the founder is long since gone, and there's been so much M&A or different changes, and so does CEO replace founder in that respect?
I again, because of who I tend to work with, of team leader, I think you still have the brand. If anything, whoever's talking about it, if it's aligned to the brand and the company culture and the values, you can still show its relevancy. It's just the department of how it's doing it. That's the switch. We're doing it because we're in this department, we're in research, this is how we make things happen. We're in production, we're in, manufacturing, whatever it might be. This is how we're making that business vision happen. And then we go on to the second sort of sphere, as I call it, which is Trailblazers. And they're your team, your immediate team. This is super important because, again, aligning to why is this so relevant to get hold of, ultimately, you're looking at high-performing teams.
Yeah.
You want to nurture that. It's as simple as, and if they don't get your vision, and they don't understand what you're doing, it's talent retention, isn't it? It's making sure that you've got the best performing team possible, and they really are enthusiastic about what they're doing. And it's making sure that they're in alignment and they're motivated in helping you achieve that goal. And then we go on to, I call them champions, but they're really the advocates. And it could be, if it's within a small company, it could be suppliers. It could be local community. It could be trade, trade and industry, for example. And then if it's within a larger organization, I would say it's other divisions within the company and your senior stakeholders. I keep them separate because ultimately they're the ones that are going to be advocating for you in different conversations.
So hang on just a moment. So we've got three of the spheres. We've got visionaries, the visionaries, the trailblazers, and the champions. And when you said champions, I just thought of the sales teams, like, right off the bat, which makes a lot of sense in a large organization. But maybe you'll get to this later. But what's the connection between the different spheres? Like, how do they interconnect with one another? Where does it go from visionaries? What's the flow of operations, process, transformation, message from visionaries to trailblazers, champions, etc.? Is that something you'll get to, or?
Yeah, but when we get to, that's the interesting thing. I think for me, when I'm looking at the brief, I will ask them, do they already have these in place? How can we optimize this? And when I look at the work that we're doing, how can I then tweak the work that we're doing to include them in the process? And sometimes it could be just really simply repurposing that content, that messaging, that making sure we're getting more collaboration, partnerships, strengthening what we're doing, utilizing those resources. We'll take local community for one, which is absolutely vital. Lots of businesses might think, if I just got media coverage, everyone would flock to my doors. And then they forget that they're part of maybe another organization as part of their rates and their rent. So the business improvement districts that we have, you're paying already to be part of that. They have a whole marketing team of customers that are right in your area. Yeah. And yet it always is the low-hanging fruit that they always forget of, I didn't even think to align myself with them. I didn't even think to start having that conversation. We pay and we send them some information, but we don't really think about what resources have we got that we could piggyback on to make that more effective.
Okay. So by being aware of the different spheres is your first foray into understanding whether or not you are taking advantage or fulfilling the needs of each of those spheres of communication, I suppose. I'm not going to interrupt anymore. We've got two more spheres to go, right? So we've talked about visionaries, trailblazers, champions. What's next?
Discoverers. So they're your customers, your early adopters, because people forget that PR does deal directly. We've been doing events for years with customers. And so it is a case, but we're in the age of community, and this is the other side of community that we're talking about, and how important community is for larger organizations, brands, but also listening to your customers on other community platforms. and making sure that you're understanding their view of your brand or problems that you're trying to solve and how you're interacting with them. I find this fascinating. And again, shout out to Mark Schaefer, who eloquently puts this all together in Belonging to the Brand of Power of Community. I look at all of the reasons why you would have a community. I personally look at community and think this could go one of two ways. We could take something that is really interesting and ruin it completely with what we need to do here. Pretty much like social, marketers just took hold of social at the very beginning and just considered it a broadcasting platform. And I had to go in and teach hold workshops to say how to be more social in social media.
Yeah, the word, it's in the title, it's in the name.
In the title, exactly. And the same with community. It's not another base to corral your customers in and just keep them there entertained.
Yeah.
The fact that you can do something so much more, we've got co-creation, we've got research and insights. And I think for me, that's my passion point. I love seeing, we have all of this data at hand here. This is one of the best things about community that I think that still isn't being utilized enough when people talk about community. But again, I'm speaking to research colleagues and insights. And I think in terms of business, they just think, well, we just want the stats, but they don't think about nurturing these people that are obviously fans in order to go that extra mile to give them the feedback. Mm-hmm. How do we nurture that? Like, how do we move forward with that? And then you're watching more D2C brands who are trying to solve problems and they're working with that community. So, yeah. I mean, women's health is a passion point for me. And again, you're watching brands that are saying, well, we co-create the products that we're doing, everything from taste, understanding what the problems we need to solve, and going from there. So yeah, it's been fascinating to see. And there's loads of things that we could do with that.
It seems to me, and I promised I wouldn't interrupt, and here I am. You can't trust me. Can't trust me, Kristel.
Yeah, go for it.
It just dawned on me that I don't know why it dawned on me now, but there's a fundamental break or dissonance in the way that we talk about community and other teams or companies or people, kind of define community. And I like what you're saying about, kind of bringing in how you're defining what communities are in the context of comms and in the context of the spheres. But I think that so many out there just think of, okay, when they hear the word community, they think audience we can take for granted, right? They think it's an audience. They don't understand that it is an organic kind of series of audiences, perhaps. It's people. It's not an audience. And, it is absolutely the opposite of something you can take for granted. It requires an investment of emotion and relationships. That's such a big thing. I don't know. But that occurred to me and I wanted to bring that up and see what you thought.
Well, also, not only take it for granted, but also remember why they're there. If they really are fans of that company or that brand, for me, they're looking for that experience and they're looking for that connection. They want to talk to other members. They want to talk to people, not only, this is the interesting thing, sidetrack here, but when I listen to brands talk about community and how they're so solid in their own brand identity, they're looking at how to work with community to build culture, like actually to drive culture. And I think that I remember thinking, wow, that's such an ask. It's such an ask, but it isn't not possible. But when I think about the experience of why people want to join community, another fear factor here is not only just treating it as an audience, but not giving the customer the experience that they're here for. And that means that goes outside of the marketing department. That might actually, imagine a fashion brand is having like community and insights. Well, you have to bring in designers. You have to bring in, manufacturing so that they understand the process. They want to get involved. You build things like these elements that can just heighten the experience. Not have to, but just creative way of thinking of how
it becomes an identity. it becomes a key part of your identity, and you can't, even the smallest kind of sense that you're not respecting the identity goes deep into the emotional center of your customers and the experiential center. If you're treating them just as, okay, you're getting emails and you've bought our products and therefore you're a fan and wonderful. Thank you for your work. Go on and please buy the next thing. That you're not treating them like you're not recognizing the part of themselves that they have decided they want to align with you. And that's a real gift that, it would be such a huge, and it is often a huge mistake to take that to not give that value, or to not appreciate that gift and not reciprocate. Back on track. Sorry. Apologize.
Back on track.
All right. So we've got Visionaries, Trailblazers, Champions, Discoverers. Fifth sphere
Pathfinder. And that is where
Pathfinders. Okay.
Yeah, that's where it's the external. It's exactly, we talk about media, but we're also looking at all of the other ways, your sponsors, your partnerships, your other communities, social media communities. You're looking at Reddit, you're looking at Discord, you're looking at Substack. Podcasts and influencers, as you know, have actually blown up. So if you think about all these popular outlets that you can, that will expand your reach, then of course, you have to engage with them. But like I said, it's one of the spheres.
Of course.
And ultimately it's the case of what do we prioritize? So really the whole plan with the 5 spheres is to give the clients like an overlay over their business strategy to go, right, what are we prioritizing? What have you got? What do we need to develop in that timeline? And it really is a long-term approach, because ultimately the short hits of media relations, it's just not enough. If you're trying to build your brand, your trust, your credibility, and all the things of authenticity and connection that any business is having to face right now, the pressure is on to be so much more than just a service or a deliverable. They're now being asked to be, oh, well, you have to be my source of leadership, community, and stability in a world that's gone upside down, topsy-turvy. Customers are needing that, according to Edwards Trust Report. So
for sure,
that's what they're looking at. So the pressure's on.
Yeah, they can't figure out how to get there, and thankfully they can't, because that's why we have jobs and we have clients, because we think we know how to get to. It's interesting. I was thinking about the peso model as you're talking about this, not because it's similar, just because you mentioned it, but also because, when you look at something like the peso model, which is paid, earned, shared, and owned types of media, and it's a very convenient tool, a way to evaluate what you're doing and understand where you need to turn up the activity and the tactics, which parts are more relevant to your strategy and than not, where you should be measuring, et cetera, et cetera. And, you're clearly not going to get there just by remembering, paid, earned, shared, owned. That's just the top level that breaks things down into digestible pieces and gives you the capabilities to make decisions better. Now, when you look at the 5 spheres, it just seemed to me that you have your peso model as your kind of activation side of things in many ways. If you're looking at, okay, am I checking the boxes for Visionaries, Trailblazers, Champions, Discoverers, Pathfinders? Then if I understand what's most important there, then I can then apply the peso model to activate my communications for them. They work hand in hand in some ways. Tell me how that works. And I mean, I know you didn't build it for the peso model, but how does it interact with that kind of activation side? Let's go there first. So tell me, because I see maybe I'm not quite getting it with the way that it works with peso. So start there. And then there's a couple of questions I want to ask about that.
Well, I'll definitely say that peso was, obviously that development, it just has influenced PR and comms, hasn't it? It just has made it so much easier. And I think that what it's done is it's opened up the fact that we have far more channels to juggle now and navigate through. When I look at, I wouldn't say it's all through, to align it just to the PESO model would say we're aligning it to content. And I think where I look at things, it's more, how are we going to interact? And you could be much more creative and look at who it is that we're trying to reach and how we do it. I'm not going to limit it to just content, because I do think that when you're looking at Trailblazers and you're looking at the teams, you're not going to send them just a memo. It's how you get them engaged. So it could be activations. It could be.
I was thinking of it more like just more as from the point of view of as an example. Like how would you fit PESO model? How would you work with the PESO model with this model together, for example? But I hear what you're saying. It's not just you have to be open. Obviously, everybody has to be open to having multiple tools in their toolkit, and you choose the model that's right for the strategy and for the business that's involved. And if I can't think of a PR team, comms team that, should not have the PESO model running at all times, like in some way. But I understand it may not be, it's not always the lens through which you should be looking to activate.
Well, also, we have to look at how are we going to measure this?
Yeah.
And that's the key thing. And this is where it goes back to, well, we're aligning this to your business strategy. So actually, when we're looking, as I said earlier, I refused to put AVEs as part of a measurement tool. In fact, when I start speaking to clients, it's like, I will ask them, how are you measuring success? What does success look like to you? Now with the 5 spheres, I've got different elements of quantitative and qualitative ways of measuring each sphere, and we have to choose which ones have you got right now, which ones can we look at. Everything from employees, you'll look at your employee net promoter score, for example. You'll look at satisfaction, you'll look at motivation. With media, of course, you're going to have we're trying to move away from impressions. We're trying to obviously with digital, you're trying to look at, well, how is this affecting referrals? How's this affecting sentiment? And again, the great thing about community, that has its own set. Again, are they participating? Are they engaging with the content that's in there, with the activities that we're doing, in terms of how are we co-collaborating with them? How is this driving change within the business? There's so much that we can do and measure against. But I think what's really important, it's the problem that we have with PR, is that we're trying to show its validity within a business context. So we have to be in line with business metrics. And I don't know if you saw Amex, it's updated, its Barcelona principles. We're now on version 4. And one of the things that I absolutely found comforting and interesting, that it's a framework, it's very loose, we can't take it fully, there's all sorts of nuances to consider.
So wait, time out. Many of the listeners wouldn't know what, like myself included. Can you remind us what AMEC is?
So AMEC is the Association of Measurement and Evaluation for Communications, and it's international. It started in 2010. Much to my delight, it said AVEs are not a metric for PR.
I'm signing up today. That's so good.
You
That's
should.
Exactly right.
It's fascinating. They just did their workshop to talk about the new set of principles. So the 7 principles, and it comes into, again, it's in line, funny enough, with this. It's like you have different stakeholder audiences, and stakeholder audiences, as they describe it, is two-way communication. It's not just broadcasting. We have to measure in that respect. And when we're looking at benchmarks, we have to look at your SMART objectives, as every business would. We have to look at what those KPIs and measurement that's relevant to the business and what we're trying to achieve, and set those targets. We also have to look at quantitative and qualitative measurements. And so it's putting all this framework into place. We're looking at transparency, how we're using, it used to be that we had to be really transparent about GDPR and data protection, how it's going to be AI. It's going to be fully transparent in how we're doing it, how we're evaluating it, how we're cross-checking it, and then how we review it. That's the other thing, how often and how you might review your teams will be at a different timeline to how you're reviewing your maybe your customers and your community work, to how you're viewing your media, your outreach. So really that's why I mean that it's a leadership skill. We have to embed it into the process. We have to get those. What I love working with founders and owners is that they're much more agile to put this in place early, as opposed to a much bigger company that now has to think about these things. They probably would have done so anyway because of standards, which is great. But if they haven't, then you have to introduce something new. And the whole point of the 5 spheres is not to give them more work to do, but to actually say, no, let's look at what you've already got. Let's start with, let's maximize it. And let's not leave that out of the process, so that they have a clearer understanding of how diverse and integrated PR actually is.
Oh, for sure. And I realize we've been talking about AVE. I should probably spell it out for listeners again, in case they forget. It's advertising value equivalent. And it's like the old way of saying, well, we secured an article in the New York Times, a mention for our CEO, which is a 1/4 inch by a 1/4 inch on the page. And if you bought an ad that was a 1/4 inch by a 1/4 inch, it would cost $30,000. So therefore, the AVE of that mention is $30,000. Congratulations, you have just had an ROI of 400 bajillion%. That's the way that AVE has traditionally worked, and that's why it's utter, complete bullshit and nonsense, and it's got to go. Impressions is next on my list because it's meaningless. I often say that impressions are like, I'm standing at my bedroom window, my neighbor walks by. I don't know if he or she sees me, but I've waved at them. That's an impression. I mean, if they saw me, it's an impression. If they glanced at my house, it's an impression. It's meaningless and it's utter nonsense. There's no action involved. If I'm waving at a highway, if my window overlooks a highway and 400 cars drive by in the pace of an hour, I've just had 400 impressions. It's nonsense.
Right.
Yeah.
It's still being used. It's still being used.
But let's go back here a little bit, because I did want to, again, we're talking about some pretty highly strategic and high level things. And how do you start with the 5 sphere framework, and like, what would an engagement look like? How do you begin the process, and how do you determine, where your focus needs to be across those 5 spheres?
So it's an audit first. So we'll go through what are your business, what are the business goals? What are we trying to achieve here? What is it? Where are you struggling? What is it that you really need to prioritize? What's urgent? And how are we going to come up with this action plan to make sure that we can not only answer those short-term challenges, but set you up for success in terms of long-term business goals? Because I just found that I was just doing it naturally. For 14 years, it just would make sense to me that I was like, well, I can, again, it really depends on how you EPR. I always saw the role as being a conduit, and using comms as the catalyst of how we communicate that message, but also what are the relationships that we're bringing to the client. And for me, I think that we start with that audit. We put together the plan going, right, how are we going to prioritize this? And it's one of 3 ways. Either they just want the audit and they can have their internal resources, or they just need a bit of strategic input. We can either set them up, especially if it's, it really just depends on their budget. Do you want us to come in, set up that you've got a team that you can actually activate this? Or do we work with you in partnership? And then we go ahead and we just start rolling out the plan. But again, for me, because of how there is so much that you can do within marketing and marketing a tool, what is the point of trying to send out all of this messaging and do this hard work if there are certain things in your marketing arsenal that just aren't there, like little things that, consistency of message, your website. So for me, it's a great way of really providing the clients with a very transparent view of what they want to, and also I would say a very transparent view of what they need to do, without being so entwined of, oh, it needs to be a sale for me.
Yeah.
We can actually be quite honest and truthful, going, you're not ready. Because
what I was thinking is, okay, so you do your audit, and you identify where the gaps are in the communication across these different spheres, where they're doing great, where they're not doing well, what needs to be improved. And then it's up, you're saying it's either up to them to then follow through with execution, or you stay with them and develop a plan to address the issues in the frame. So the framework kind of gives them a blueprint for moving forward. And then you can figure out where to go. It seems like a lot of what we're doing now, a lot of these, I suppose, assessments that I'm hearing about, that I myself do, but also across consultancies and the subject matter experts out there, it ends up with this plan that involves a whole lot of content always. Like it's often a content driven, but not always, but it's often a content driven, solution that comes first. The gaps often are the result of, well, of course your vision isn't really clear because you're not putting out the messages you need to. You're not on the right platforms to do it. Your internal communications is falling flat, whatever it is, or you don't have, these aren't there. So what can you do? You can start a blog, right? You can have a video channel. You can be posting on XYZ. These are all tactics. Very, very few people say, well, you need to start by developing that vision, and you need to build those narrative pillars and go back there. But it's a whole big package. I'm talking about all this naturally, of course, because I think that it could be overwhelming to a client. It could be overwhelming to especially a founder or a small business owner, right? I mean, once they're faced with this, oh man, I have to do all this stuff. That's where AI likely comes into play. And I know that that's not necessarily what you're focused on. Clearly you're part of that world. But do you think that AI, I mean, maybe this is a leading question, but do you think that AI is going to really accelerate the acceptance, let's say, of the 5 spheres of connection? And do you think it's an enabler for these things, or are there places where no, it really needs to be human?
100% is going to aid it. 100%. It's human first. And I think this goes back to the question of leadership, because we have to look at things like, everyone knows this well now, I'm sure, but it's, connection, it's empathy, it's those skills that everyone is trying to develop, authenticity. Well, the way that I would look at AI to really help assist this is research and insights. Let's have a look at these different spheres and also audiences. What matters to them? How are we processing that information, and how can we do that at speed, and at least have a really good baseline to start from? I would also say I love AI from a strategic point of view. It's a strategic, sort of sparring partner for me. It's really testing my ideas and really going, like, how can we make this better? So I've been having so much fun playing with it, and just going really challenging and trying to get the best out of the situation, and looking at practicality, looking at all sorts of elements just to make it work. And that's the whole point, isn't it? You can have great strategic ideas, but if it doesn't work, then what's the point? How does it work in the real world? And give me some useful cases or stats or probability. And that's the joy of working in agency, is that you get to see other different industries, and you're taking from all of that experience. I was told, read everything, absolutely read everything, and I still apply that today. And that's where you're getting your creativity and your insights. Well, AI will just speed that up for you in terms of the research and then the strategy that you're applying for it. And then it's speed of development. You know,
Yeah.
I have issues apart from what you showed me with your tool. I haven't seen anything yet from a writing perspective that I still haven't got the full, I'm happy to publish as is. There's so much work that's required in it. So I always say human-centric approach, human-first approach to what you're developing. But, oh, wow, the speed in which you can transform that into the different variants to get this out. I'm just so conscious that the level of the band of customers that I'm working with, they're so under pressure.
Yeah.
They have too much to think about. So how can we make it easy? How can it make my job easy? And I look at AI and I think, well, it's not only who I'm working with as a client base, but who can I teach this to? What tools can I be embedding? So using AI in terms of right, if you wanted to learn more about this, perhaps fill out this questionnaire and find out for yourself what you could be doing. And then you can use AI, it'll be a third-party tool that I'm investigating. And it's like, right, how can they get their report straight away? Yeah. And then, really learn from it. Like I said at the very beginning, I think that we have all our challenges within the industry and we can talk about it on LinkedIn, or we can actually come up with something that might be hopefully useful.
Stop talking, start doing. It's like as you're talking about the model and the framework. Every time I think framework, I think, okay, this is great for AI because then I've already got a Claude project or a custom GPT in mind for like, okay, I'm gonna plug in the everything I need to know about the 5 spheres, and I'm gonna run strategies by my new partner and see what my gaps are and do my assessments and just check out, get some advice. Yeah, you're falling flat as you have no champions. Here's what you need to do. And then, I have my other ways to kind of create amazing content. And thank you, by the way, for that little compliment. You're right. Most AI content is not ready for publishing. And even the stuff that I'm doing, which I think is super advanced, is I would never say to a user or a customer that, oh yeah, here's your blog post. Just don't even look at it. Just post it. No, it's maybe 90. If I'm lucky, it's 90 to 95% there. It's just like, and that's because people are complex and content is complex. And, as much as AI puts a lot of stuff together and is able to make sense of a lot of things, it still, and probably, I don't know if it ever will really mimic human complexity, which is one of the advantages that we have.
That's the beauty of storytelling. I think that's the difference. How we look at film directors, they will have the same script, but how they're going to interpret that will be completely different. And I think that's the beauty of storytelling, is that we're looking at different lenses here. It has to apply, or it has to be, it has to connect in a certain way, and it will be dependent on who the director is and how it's done. And from that perspective, that is a human element right there. It's that creativity. It's that.
Ooh. I just thought of something like another way to talk about what I'm. Thank you. I just have a new way of kind of describing what I'm doing here. Is, when you're creating content, it's if you're thinking about it like filmmaking, do you want Scorsese at the helm, or do you want a second year film school student whose great body of work includes last month's Claymation 5-minute special? There's very different things here. And you don't always want Scorsese. I admit that, because that can be long and it can be very deep and it can be very context rich, which is kind of where I am. So it takes a certain type and won't appeal to everybody, but that's okay. I've just glanced at the clock. I can't believe we've been talking for over an hour. We can keep going, on and on, and I know that it wouldn't be a problem to just find another thing to talk about. I have a list, and we only hit 1 or 2 things.
Wow.
Any last words, Kristel, before we wrap up?
Any last words? I really think that as an industry with PR and comms, we have such benefit to what is going on in the world right now. And the way that I see it is that we need really smart, successful leaders in this world. And I just want to see them succeed with the creative solutions and that they can bring into the world. Because when I look at power of business and I look at the power of community as in the people coming together, we really need to build better. And I feel that as PR and comms professionals and how we're really uniting what that vision is, how it's actually being implemented and seeing what that success is. We're also that conscious of, the social conscience of it, making sure that it is transparent, it is authentic. The word is integrity, showing what you're doing from the inside out and holding them accountable. I think one of the key things for me is not only do we have to help them succeed, but we also have to challenge them and don't be afraid to.
Yeah.
I really, that's one of the hardest things that I see people, are having at the moment. It's like we're in that need of, we need to survive, but equally, we're in services, we're not in servitude, and we are the experts.
We're in services, not in servitude. I have to remember that.
That's been my motto for 14 years.
I think that's terrific. I think I wholeheartedly agree with you. And, at the risk of being accused of having delusions of grandeur on behalf of our profession, I've said this before, I'll say it again, we as comms people, and I'll even include marketers in this because, marketers are storytellers as well, and or at least certain parts of marketing. We do have the unique skill set to make all of this work and run so much better. I'm not saying we should run the business. What I am saying, though, is that we have a certain set of talents. We have the right mix to not only build relationships, understand community, reach out, make those human connections and with our stakeholders, but also because of the way that, generative AI works, we are uniquely positioned, I think, we storytellers, we word people, to really innovate and come up with the most interesting ways to take advantage of AI and put it all together. And I think we could be an incredible force for, I like to say a force for good, although at the same time, I do sometimes think that PR and comms is the source of a lot of evil in the world. And we'll put a pin in that for another conversation. But we could be a force for good, and we could be a force for change, and we should be. Anyway, Kristel, awesome to have you on the show. I'm so glad I've been after you for a while. I think it's been a long time coming. It's so great to be your friend, but it's also great to be to feel like we have this profession that we share, and think a lot in the same ways. And I always learn something when I talk to you. So I hope that everybody listening also learned quite a bit, takes the 5 spheres of connection with them, looks deeper into each one of those spheres for their own programs. Check out kvcomms.com. That's kvcomms.com, to learn more about Kristel and the spheres and her business and the Rebel Network and all these great things. You can find Kristel on LinkedIn, as we all are, and her name will be spelled properly in the episode graphic, etc. Kristel Valaydon, which I was mispronouncing Valaydon for a long time. Forgive me, please. Usually when people say Nestle instead of Nestle, I correct them immediately. So, you've been your forbearance is admirable. Kristel Valaydon, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.